Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Administrator Pruitt, it's hard to know where to begin this morning. Every day there seems to be a new scandal and you at dead center. It's clear that I've had policy disagreements with you from the beginning and that I opposed your nomination. So it should come as no surprise when I called on you to resign. What is surprising, however, is the breadth of voices who agree with me that your leadership at the EPA is disastrous. I think it is extraordinary that so many previous administrators of the EPA, including Republicans, have lambasted your leadership. The very first EPA administrator, a Republican appointed by President Nixon and reappointed by President Reagan, described your actions as the EPA, and I quote here, taking a meat axe to the protections of public health and the environment, end quote. He went on to say that you and your top staff, quote, don't fundamentally agree with the mission of the agency, end quote. Another Republican former EPA administrator, Christine Todd Whitman, said, and I quote here, Scott Pruitt is unfit to run the EPA because he lacks ethical integrity, a quality that is of the utmost importance when entrusted with protecting the environment and public health, end quote. There is nothing I can say here today that would come close to having such esteemed former officials chastise you publicly like that. But I will do my best because it needs to be said that your tenure at the EPA is a betrayal of the American people. You have used your office to enrich yourself at the expense of the American taxpayer and public health, and such abuses have led to several investigations. The EPA Inspector General is investigating your luxury travel, your trips back to Oklahoma for football games, your cut-rate condo rental from a lobbyist, your extensive use of clean drinking water programs to promote your political advisors, and how one of your closest advisors was paid despite not showing up for work for 3 months. The government's nonpartisan watchdog, the Government Accountability Office, or the GAO, is investigating your questionable policies to stack EPA's science advisory committees with industry, as well as a lobbying video you starred in urging political action. Even your own White House is reviewing your sweetheart condo deal and your spending on your soundproof privacy booth. I can only wonder if more investigations will start based on your fast-tracking a new Superfund site at the behest of a conservative media personality and other reports that EPA has taken quick actions to help political donors and lobbyists. One investigation has already been completed, one I personally requested. The GAO found that you broke the law by hiding taxpayer spending on the privacy booth. I have a lot of questions for you today on this topic because 1 month later, you haven't followed the law by reporting to Congress or the President, your boss, how you let this happen and how you plan to fix it. And now you haven't submitted to this committee the statutorily required reports on all your other office spending as we sit here today trying to get to the bottom of your reckless spending. I'm announcing this morning that I just requested a new GAO investigation, this one to determine if EPA violated the Appropriations Law banning taxpayer spending on publicity and propaganda by engaging in political speech via social media. The Office of Special Counsel is also examining whether EPA's April 13th tweet violated the Hatch Act, which governs the ethics of political speech by public employees. These two investigations into EPA's single tweet encapsulate a running theme: your disregard for ethics and your disregard for taxpayer dollars. Administrator Pruitt, I'm tempted to say your scandals are a mere sideshow distracting us from the long-lasting devastation your leadership is making on human health and the environment. Indeed, while your scandals splash from front pages and clog up digital media, you've been hard at work dismantling scores of important protections. You've taken steps to roll back clean air and clean water protections, walked away from our historic global commitment to reduce the impacts of climate change. You've even managed to distort and unravel toxics reform, which was recently enacted on a bipartisan basis. Several of your attempts to halt progress on these and other public health efforts have been rejected by the courts for violating basic legal requirements for altering existing standards, requirements that you should be familiar with after decades of losing lawsuits against the EPA before you took its helm. But ultimately, Administrator Pruitt, I just can't separate your scandals from these shameless efforts to dismantle EPA. They are one and the same. Both your scandals and your policy decisions abuse your position of public trust and make a mockery of your responsibilities as head of EPA. You show the same disregard for our ethical standards and fiscal controls as you show for the air we breathe and the water we drink. Using your office to enrich yourself and your friends at the expense of the American taxpayer and the public health is a disgrace. The fiscal year 2019 budget proposal is yet another giant blinking sign that you don't take your responsibility to this country seriously. The budget proposes to slash EPA's research programs in half, gutting the ability of the agency to identify threats to public health and the environment, as well as solutions to those threats. The request also cuts nearly 50% of funds sent directly to the states. For example, the budget proposes to eliminate state funding for radon poisoning prevention, childhood lead poisoning prevention, hazardous waste disposal, and even drinking water monitoring. This isn't cooperative federalism, it's flat-out abandonment. The request proposes to cut off our multi-year effort to support independent monitoring of the contaminated water still flowing from the Gold King mine into areas of New Mexico and the Navajo Nation. The $4 million program is barely more than your reported spending on your security detail. And your promises in this very room a year ago to make sure the Navajo and others harmed by the Gold King mine spill are properly compensated have fallen completely flat. Not one payment has been made. The budget also proposes to give polluters a pass by cutting criminal and civil enforcement by a quarter. The budget backs off entirely from virtually all climate programs, including voluntary coordination, international partnerships, and basic monitoring. I'm not surprised to see that you even propose to cut EPA's Inspector General by 10%. I suppose slowing down their work might sound appealing. Administrator Pruitt, the budget request before us today is dead on arrival because it would pull out the rug from underneath every single state in our country and decimate critical public health and environmental programs. This budget request is also dead on arrival because it is completely tone deaf to reality. This bipartisan Congress has maintained steady funding for EPA for the last 2 years running and even boosted water infrastructure investments and lead reduction programs, despite the administration's draconian proposals to shrink the agency into oblivion. So I'm not worried about this. I'm not worried that this Congress will accept drastic cuts to EPA's operating budget or that we are going to cut off support that we send to the states. What I am worried about, Administrator Pruitt, is that you have been treating your position of public trust as a golden ticket for extravagant travel and fine dining and as a platform to cozy up to media personalities, political donors, and polluters. I'm worried you are spending all your time enriching yourself and your friends while betraying your mission to protect human health and the environment. I look forward to our discussion today. Glad to see that Senator Leahy has joined us, the ranking member on our Appropriations Committee, and thank you, Madam Chairman.